you're judging?
I'm judging.
Okay, and you're timekeeping?
Yep.
So I should look at you?
We're not having panels, Rachel?
You ready? Ready? Resolve. Freedom of expression via the internet ought to be valued above the government regulation of the media. To see why we must affirm the resolution, we must look towards the following. The value of freedom of expression, in which freedom is defined as the power of acting, Black's Law Dictionary, and expression is the manner in which one expresses oneself, especially in speaking or performing, American Heritage Dictionary. Together, basically, the right for me to speak my mind without any restrictions on how I feel, or restrictions faulted by the government. To justify freedom of expression, we must look towards the value criteria of individual autonomy, defined by Black's Law Dictionary as the right to power of self-government. Observation 1. The responsibility of individual autonomy is to look out for your kids. Most kids are not mature adults and they cannot make all the decisions for them. So we have to watch out for them and protect them and to be able to help them through certain situations. As on the internet, we cannot let them go on unprotected, otherwise it's our fault. And just because they can get into stuff and could harm them does not make the government have to regulate it. We just have to be more responsible parents. Contention 1. Freedom of expression is necessary for a separate self-representation form of government. A. Not allowing freedom of expression silences the voice of the people. People are granted this right, and like in the United States, in the First Amendment, the right to free speech and freedom of media. This is so they don't have their voice restricted, because if the government doesn't know how you feel or what you want, then they can't represent you. And once they start regulating in terms of the internet, then it starts a deadly slippery slope in which it could end up that we don't have any voice at all. B. Without the voice of the government, self-representation is out of reach. This is the state that self-representation is the best form of government working today in a democracy, and if we don't let the people speak out, then we won't know what they want, and if we don't know what they want, then we cannot act out and form a democracy. C. Without freedom of expression, a government for the people is impossible. Just to draw the conclusion, if we don't know what the people want, we base all our decisions, if we restricted their voice, as negating this resolution would uphold, then we would restrict their voice, and we wouldn't, or could not have a full democracy, because people cannot speak their mind and express their feelings. Contention 2. The right to express ourselves on the internet does not infringe on anyone's rights. A. Access to the internet is voluntary. First of all, you got to turn on your computer and you have to load up the internet and apply a password in. And this is all voluntary. If you feel like it could harm you, then you don't do it. If you feel your kids can be harmed from it, you do not allow them access to this. But to allow access and then saying that they got into a bad site would be faulty, because it's your job. And it ties back in the individual autonomy, because we have to self-govern ourselves in order to make this perfect society and a democracy. B. You make yourself accountable for material that is harmful. As you go to these sites, you have to commit yourself and have searches to get to these sites that may contain pornography, child pornography, or such harmful things. You have to allow yourself to go there. You have to search and find these things. They're not just there as soon as you turn on the internet. So if you go there, you make yourself accountable for it. You make yourself viable to whatever is on there. C. Entering the site is your choice. Back to individual autonomy. It's the only way if we self-govern ourselves, then we can stray from what we believe is harmful. If we teach our kids that drugs are bad or whatever, or that pornography is bad, then we don't allow it. We can govern ourselves away from pornogaphy. Contention 3. Individual autonomy is the only way to regulate the internet. A. Bad stuff is everywhere. This outside and just in the real world, drugs are accessible, and the government regulates drugs. They do not allow use or selling of drugs, but still we can achieve these drugs. We still can go out and buy drugs. But the only way to make sure that drugs aren't around is to have individual autonomy and be able to self-govern ourselves away from drugs and not be able to use the drugs. And if the government tried to regulate the internet, there would still be access of it. It's just that we shouldn't regulate the internet, because it harms other people's freedom of expression just because some people might have misused it, and that's unjust in a democracy in which a majority rules. But bad stuff is available everywhere, and we can find it anywhere, so we can't regulate the internet just because we believe something bad is on there. B. Making yourself available to these things is your fault. Once again, stating that if you go to this site and you click and you do all the searches in which to find this site, then it's your fault, and you're responsible in individual autonomy of what you see and other people's freedom of expression. C. Self-governing yourself is protecting your kids is your responsibility. Draw back and tie it all in to my observation and show how the value criteria holds the value, is that it's your responsibility. And the only true way to regulate the internet is to self-govern yourself not to go there. If you teach your kids that this is bad, then they won't go there, and you self-govern yourself not to do that. But the government has no possible way, or it's not just for them to regulate the internet. And that's why we should affirm today's resolution, which states freedom of expression via the internet ought to be valued above government regulation. What that means. Now let's stand open for cross-examination.
Judge, money, good. Okay, today in the United States, before a pornography shop can open its doors, how far does it have to be away from a school?
How far does it have to be?
Yes.
Not for sure.
Will you agree with me?
What kind of pornography shop?
Pornography shop? Obviously, where they sell nude pictures of individuals.
Like a Texaco that has Playboy magazines?
No, I'm talking like movies.
Like a head shop?
Sure, head shop.
Okay.
That'll work. Now, how far does it have to be away from school?
Probably pretty far. I would
Pretty far.
imagine.
Why would you think so? I mean, is that society is deemed that this element needs to be away from our children. Why is that?
They just did it, so it's.
Oh, they just did it just so.
No, they just did it because they don't want that. Like a school is supposed to be like a pretty nice place. I mean,
So they did it to
I don't know why they
protect
did
children from the element of pornography, correct?
I guess they could have did it to protect children from the.
So the internet, in every school we have like in this school we have I don't know 10 computers in every class almost, or something like that, close. But using the internet, isn't it true that using the internet we bring that pornography directly into school?
No, because they have blocks on it, which
Do they?
They have censorships on it where someone looks and can
They
see
have
what you're going.
censorships. They have so the schools a government regulation censors.
No, they have just a school because the school cannot allow you to access this.
Okay, fine. You said that it's not just in a democracy where the majority rules. So if the majority says we want regulations on the internet,
No,
If the majority-
that in a democracy that we cannot regulate freedom of expression.
you said the majority rules, correct? Basically, the greatest good for the greatest number is how we run our government.
Yeah, but we cannot, and that's how we do it in a democracy. But we can't regulate someone else's right just because there's 20 people and it's just
Okay,
me. You
the
can't
Mills-
limit my right to a freedom.
Going on the
free,
Mills
fair
harm
trial.
principle, if society perceives a harm, then they have a right to ameliorate or get rid of that harm, correct?
The Mills harm principle is basically that my right extends until it infringes on
Exactly.
others.
So they can take away others' rights if they see that it's going to harm somebody else.
No, if it infringes on someone else's rights, they can't
If it's
predict
going
the
to
future.
if it's going to harm somebody's
They
rights.
can't predict the future. It's voluntary. If you make yourself available to the
But-
pornography.
But fine, if there is a harm that they perceive, they have the right.
What harm are you perceiving?
I'm just saying, if there is a harm that they
We have
perceive.
to like base like some guideline. I don't know what harm.
No,
you're
I'm
talking
saying, just, this
If
is.
there's a harm,
Can you let me answer
Okay.
one question, please? Fine, if there is a harm, if the government perceives a harm, I don't care what harm it is, but if they perceive a harm, they have the duty, the moral obligation to protect their citizens, yes?
in most cases.
In most cases, that's the job of the government, correct?
It's one of their jobs.
Okay, and going back to democratic rule, well, most governments, the legit governments are under democratic rule, correct?
I didn't state that. I just said that that's the best form of government.
That's the best form of government. In that form of government, we use utilitarianism, or rather, the greatest number for the greatest good,
Well, it's a
correct?
broad form of that.
It's a
yes.
broad form. So if the government, the people, which obviously the people, says we want government regulations upon the internet, finish the question or stop? Just stop, okay. Can I have like my prep time in 30 seconds, please? basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to present the negative arguments or the negative case, and then I'm going to refute the affirmative case. The value I'll uphold in today's debate is that of justice, defined as fairness, giving each man their fairness. How I will evaluate fairness, or rather justice, is through the value criterion of utilitarianism. The greatest good for the greatest number of people. If we look at today's governments, what do we find? We have democracy, which is based upon utilitarianism principle. What is the greatest number for the greatest good? That is how we make our government. Observation 1. Society legitimizes government by sticking around, or by remaining there. Subpoint A. By not overthrowing the government, the society legitimizes it. Subpoint B. Sticking around, they have the choice to leave. A great example of fun, just looking at this, we have the American Revolution. In England, we had all these people, they did fun, they didn't like the government, they left. By leaving it, they did not legitimize the government, they left. Subpoint B, they overthrew the government. They got rid of the government, they totally just smashed it. That's what they need to do. Obviously, because that's what, if the government's not working, they get rid of it. So, observation 2, no freedom is an absolute. Mill's harm principle, subpoint A. If it harms somebody else, then they restrict that freedom. Obviously, we cannot harm somebody. So obviously, there's no way that freedom of expression can be an absolute. It only extends until it has the ability to harm somebody. Contention 1. Government regulations reflect the will of the people. Subpoint A. Society dictates the laws of the land. In our society, basically, we make the laws. We are the governing body. The individual makes the choice what they need or what they want. We vote on it, and that's how we make laws. It's not that like they just make laws. No, the people make the laws, and if the people want government regulation on the internet, that's what the people get. That is the government regulations. The people want it, the people get it. As my opponent said, democracy is the best way to go, and through democracy we have utilitarianism. Fine, if we decide democratically that we want government regulations, then democratically we get government regulations. Subpoint B, democratic laws are made. Democracy based, subpoint A, democracy equals utilitarianism. I can say this only so many times. My opponent agrees totally that, fine, we can decide this matter utilitarianistically. We can say, fine, if it's the greatest good for the greatest number, or rather, if that's going to give us justice, fine, that's how we're going to decide it. Contention 2, government regulations do not equal censorship. Subpoint A, not allowing info doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to express themselves. Fine, they cannot, if there's government regulations that there's no porn on the internet, that in no way says, fine, you cannot say this, or it does not censor somebody. They just take it elsewhere. You want to have pornographic magazines or whatever, you go to the nudie shop or the head shop, as my opponent said, and you get your magazines. Express yourself that way. You want to, I don't know, draw nude pictures, then draw them. Express yourself, but you do not need the internet, so we're not censoring them. Contention 3. If society perceives a harm, then this legitimizes regulation. If the majority of society thinks that they will be harmed, then it's the government's obligation to regulate the internet. Basically, society thinks, which is made of all of the individuals in our society think that there's a harm on the internet that they need to be protected from, then it's the government's obligation to go and stop that harm, get rid of that harm. So if the society says that we want government regulation and that we perceive a harm, then it's the government's job, and we should basically get rid of that harm. And by doing so, if we have to limit somebody's freedom of expression, then that is just, because we're protecting society, the greatest good for the greatest number. And as we've said in Mill's harm principle, observation 2, that freedom of expression is not an absolute and only extends as far as until it harms somebody, and if it's going to harm somebody, then we're going to stop it. Going on to the affirmative case, my opponent is upholding the value of freedom of expression, speaking or performing. Fine, if we regulate the net, they can still speak, they can still perform. They just can't do it on the net where they're going to harm somebody. They can go to a head shop, they can go do all that good stuff, they can write their books, they can write their pamphlets, they can do it everywhere but on the net. Rather, so we're nowhere near censoring them. My opponent says autonomy, self-government. And he later on, in his observation 1, says, fine, the children, they don't have autonomy. Look out for their kids on the net, and parents. Well, that's all right for some of the individuals that can regulate what they want, or rather have the ability to. But who's to say that I have the ability, or my opponent does, or any person? If there's something out there that's going to harm another individual, then we need to get rid of it. On to his contention 1. Freedom is necessary for self-representation. Subpoint A, government needs to know what you want. Fine, they can need to know what I want without me having to go and look at a pornographic magazine or kiddie porn or anything like that. They don't. But if I regulate porn, that is no way stopping the government need to know what I want. However, they can find out other ways what I want than the internet. Fine, you write your councilman, you write your senator, you don't need the internet. So point B, freedom of expression, only way to have self-representation. Fine, my opponent's saying freedom of expression via the internet is the only way. If he's saying fine, freedom of expression is the only way to have self-representation, fine, but we do not need to have the internet to have freedom of expression, or rather self-representation. There are other avenues from which you can take this. You can, as I said, write your senator, etc. Going on to subpoint C, no freedom of expression denies the possibility of having a government, and there's no way you can speak your mind. Fine, I will grant you that we need freedom of expression to have a government, but that freedom of expression does not mean it has to be on the internet. Contention 2, no infringing on rights. Subpoint A, everything is voluntary. Fine, we look back to cross-examination where we discussed the schools. These children are on the internet, fine, they're not with their parents anymore, and if they find something that's going to harm those children while they are not aided by a teacher, those children are harmed. So basically what I'm saying is that against his observation 1 and his contention 2, cross-apply that, fine. Some children are going to get on the internet, if they're harmed, they're harming society, and obviously we need to protect society. Contention 3, individual autonomy regulates the internet. Government should try to still have access. No justice in democracy where rules. Fine, my opponent's saying that individual autonomy regulates the internet. However, as I've said against his observation 1, that there are some people that do not have individual autonomy, that will never have it, and those people are the ones that are going to be harmed. Therefore, that's the people the government needs to protect, and the only way they can protect them is through government regulations. He also says that it's not just in a democracy where democracy rules. Fine, democratically, we're going to decide to have government regulations, and we're going to decide that we need them. On his subpoint B, available is your fault, cross-apply the attacks against his contention 2, and his subpoint C, cross-apply the attacks against his contention 1. And obviously, looking to this case, I stand up for cross-examination.
Okay, knives can be a potential harm, correct? Just a knife, I can stab, okay, here, just use situation.
A knife can be a great instrument that can yield life and give
Situation,
somebody like
could I stab you with this pen? Could I stab you?
But you might.
But could this harm you if I stabbed you with the pen?
Anything's possible.
So we can eliminate this, because anything's possible, correct? And you said, because the internet can be a possible harm, that we should eliminate it, correct? They're
I'm not advocating that we totally eliminate the internet.
No,
That's
that we
ludicrous.
should do away with something that a person might feel is fine. If a guy's older, then he feels pornography, he likes to go visit his pornography site.
Well, no,
and a kid could get to it,
like
so we should
automatic
eliminate
weapons.
the pornography.
Fine, that can kill somebody, so we got rid
No,
of them. They
can
were
you
really
listen to me?
in harm.
If I feel pornography is good, and I can go see it, and I'm of age, and I feel that pornography is good, but this kid who's not of age goes to visit this pornography site, it could harm him, and that's what you're stating. So
No, then
eliminate
go to a
pornography.
head shop where it is regulated and get it off the internet. You can still freely express
Now,
yourself.
how would this kid get into the pornography site? Wouldn't he have to have a credit card?
No, because pornography is all over the internet, and you can get it on
And
anything
you just
want.
get on. You don't have to have like a credit card or an account number to get on. You don't have to pay for it.
There's like plenty of
Yes,
ways
no.
you can find. No, there are plenty of ways that a child can access sites where there's pornography, and if that's going to harm them, then we need to protect them.
Okay. And you're going to use utilitarianism to support justice, correct?
Yes, the
Now, we
greatest
can all
good for the
agree
greatest number.
that utilitarianism is good, right?
I would hope so.
Now, if everyone in this room decided to kill you, is that just?
Yes,
It is just.
that's totally just. If
It's totally just.
if they find that I am a harm that needs to be gotten rid of,
No, just for no reason. They figure we should kill you.
well, obviously that's not logical that they're just going to
What
get
do you
rid
mean it's
of
not
me.
logical? We decided to. I just conducted a meeting. We decided to kill you. Is that just?
Well, I don't think Amberly or anybody are going to want to kill me.
No,
I'm a
you don't
good
think.
person.
But you're missing it. Hypothetically speaking, if we all decide to kill you, is that just?
Yes, hypothetically that is just.
For no reason. We just go off and kill you. Is that?
Obviously that you'd have to have a meeting to discuss a reason to kill me, so obviously there would be a reason.
No, we just decided to kill you. Is that just? Just answer the question.
Yes.
Okay. And you don't have to have a credit card or account number to get on the pornography sites, correct?
Anything is accessible on the internet.
Anything is accessible on the
Yes.
internet. Isn't anything accessible for me right now? I can go to a store and
Well-
steal something, which is just as illegal as getting onto the internet with a
Those
fake
there
account.
are
correct?
regulations that prevent you from going to like
There
into
are
the head
regulations.
shops.
Now, isn't there regulations on the internet?
As of now,
As of
no.
a credit, not a regulation, but a credit card number that'll stop you. That's a roadblock from getting you on.
No, because you can go elsewhere where they
you
give
can
it
go
out for free.
elsewhere.
Yes.
I have no further questions. Call my friend Tom out with 30 seconds with this, please.
Langford, please come to the reception
you not think
desk.
that's probably
Mark
annoying,
Langford,
Robert?
please come to the reception
And
desk.
rude? Minute and a half.
Let me go over my opponent's case and go on to review my case. First, his value is that of justice, and I do believe that justice is crucial. Now, my opponent's way of achieving justice is utilitarianism, and he stated that if, for no reason at all, if we decide to kill him, that that would be just. And that's not just because everyone has a right to life. It is stated in like the laws of man, everyone has a right to live, and that's why we come into society. It says in all the laws of a society, it says thou shalt not kill. And that's where utilitarianism is flawed if you want it to equal justice. Because that is not just to take one's life without proper cause. He said that they want to do that, but that's not true. If we have a right to utilitarianism, then we can plot against him. And that's how my opponent's case is basically flawed. Because what he is upholding is illogical and irrational. His observation is American Revolution. They left. They didn't want it. That's fine. If they left, they can leave. No one's stopping them from leaving. They can go to Cuba and have a dictatorship if they feel. That's fine. His observation, too, is also ironic because he said that rights are not an absolute and that we have restrictions on rights based on Mills-Harm principle. Now, the internet, you have to access your ability to get there. The Mills-Harm principle is I can swing my fist until it infringes and hits somebody. Now, if he's going to walk into my fist, it's not my fault. As on the internet, you have to go there, and that's walking into the fist. It's stepping into the bullet. It's how it's illogical. It's not it's not forcing me to do this. I access this by myself, and that's what my opponent is missing. He's jumping in front of the knife here, and that's not, it's not my fault. He jumped on something that I had put here, and that's how Mills-Harm principle does not work in this instance. Contention 1 is the will of the people, and that's fine. People have the will of the people. It's the governing body is if they want to get rid of it, then they have to get rid of it. If that's what they want by utilitarianism. But no, if everyone decided, they misunderstood me when I stated democracy and the majority, because if people decide that I should have a right to a fair trial, it's still granted in a democracy, which my opponent brings up, and that is not just. So if they decide this, then it's not just. If they define that not everyone should have a right to a fair trial, it doesn't make that just, and that's what my opponent is missing. This contention 2, regulations does not completely censor. It's fine. It's still missing the fact that there are potential harms everywhere, and that's why we can't just regulate it, because it starts a slippery slope, which my opponent didn't argue, and I'll go on to bring on my case. It's contention 3, society sees a harm, they eliminate it. Well, there's harms everywhere, potential harms. They tried to eliminate drugs, which they feel was a potential harm. That didn't work because people who still want it can have access to it. My value is that of freedom of expression. He said they can still speak and perform, yes, but as stated in my contention 1, which I'll bring up in a second, starts a deadly slippery slope, which can eliminate freedom of expression altogether. Back criteria of individual autonomy, he completely missed, just saying that I self-govern myself. If I teach my kids that drugs are bad, then they won't do drugs. If I drill it into their brain that drugs are bad, they won't do it. If I show that pornography is bad, then they won't access the site. They won't make themselves available to this. Contention 1, freedom of expression. It's allows separate representation of government. Basically, he says they can still do it without the internet. Yes, they can, but this is a mass means. This is like a telephone. And if you want to eliminate a telephone just because I could be talking dirty to someone and making money off of it, then it's not just. And as brought up my slippery slope, if we regulate it now, what's going to stop us from regulating everything? Just if they regulate this now, then next week, they can be keeping us from talking about not being radicals and not having a new form of government. Contention 2, right to express, it does not infringe. He said we must remove it. It's why pornography head shops aren't right next to the school. We have it there just because it's illegal. We shouldn't regulate someone if they're going to go into it, even if it doesn't matter how close it is to the school. If they're still going to walk there and go to it, it doesn't make sense. And we do have walls that protect them from that, which a credit card and account number, which they do have. My opponent says that you can get elsewhere, and it's logical that they do have credit card numbers in which to get these sites. That's how they make their money, and that's why they have it. They don't just put it out there for free. Contention 3, individual autonomy is the only way to regulate the internet. He cross-applied a lot of his arguments, but basically he missed it. It's just that I say the bad stuff everywhere. If he wants to cross-apply that, that's wrong. So that's why we should affirm today's resolution.
How much prep time do you have?
Negative is 2 minutes remaining.
Can I call out players of those, please?
Minute and a half.
Judge, audience. Okay, basically what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give you a line by line and refute everything my opponent just said. Then I'm going to give you some key voting issues. My opponent, starting with the negative case, he says justice is crucial. Fine, that's all he says. But he says my means of achieving it are bad. He says killing me is just. Rights. Everyone has the right to life. And okay, what I'd like to show you now, my opponent says, no, we can't take life away. In our society, if it means that we need to take life away, i.e. capital punishment, then they have the right to. They have a harm, they see a harm, then they will get rid of me. Fine, they have the right to kill me if that's what the society deems necessary. So my opponent says, fine, they just can't kill nobody. Yes, they can. So obviously, the values flow, the value criterion flow. Going on to the observation 1, he says, fine, you can leave it. They can leave, he agrees with it, flow that as well. Observation 2, he says, Mill's harm principle. He says, it's ironic, walking in the fist, kids in front of it. Fine, he says, it's like walking into a fist. Well now, if I'm doing 60 miles an hour and I hit a kid, I'm going to jail and I'm going to it's the same thing. Fine. He says they're walking into it. Well, if it's a kid walking into it, you hurt somebody, then you go to jail for manslaughter. It's the same thing. The kids are out there, they don't know anything, they're harmed. He's saying, fine, well, it's their fault. Well now, obviously, what are we going to do, blame the kid for walking into it and they didn't know? He goes on to say in his, going on to contention 1, he says it's the will of the people. Fine, it's the will of the people, he agrees with it. Contention 2 says regulations doesn't censor it. He says potential harms are everywhere and that, like drugs, we can't get rid of it. And so what are we supposed to do? Just say, fine, forget the drug campaign and let all this bad stuff happen? No, the government needs to try to protect the people. Actually, the drug campaign is actually working. We're stopping all this crud from coming in the country and we're helping our citizens. Going on to the negative, the affirmative case. Observation 1, autonomy, it's there. their job to teach children. First, let's look at his value of freedom of expression. As I argued against Mill's harm principle, if the government sees that there's a need to limit that right because it's going to harm somebody, then the government is just in doing so because they are protecting its citizens. His value criterion being that of autonomy and self-government, well, fine. He says children. The parents are going to teach them. No. Well, like in children. I mean, as in school, I can get an internet code and I can just do whatever I want to. Fine. At school, the children get on the internet, they're harmed. My opponent says, oh, the parents are going to teach them. In his observation one, he says, the parents are going to teach them. My parents tell me pornography is always bad. However, my dad probably has a magazine in his closet that I look at, or like when I was 12 or something. Every kid's done that. Fine, they tell their parents that they're bad, but there's kids that go like find the magazines with their clubhouse or whatever. Fine, they still do it. They're still going to find it even though their parents are bad. My parents tell me not to speed. I do it anyway. I mean, just because my parents say it's bad doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. Going on to his contention one, freedom of expression. Still do it without internet. He says this is a slippery slope and radical, that we're just going to get rid of the telephone and it's going to be bad. No, what we're doing is we're protecting our society. And if the society deems it necessary to get rid of certain things, well then that's the way to do it. It's not just because some radical is going to want to do it. No, they're protecting society and that's their purpose, not to just like get rid of it. And at any time, like my opponent says, when they're trying to get rid of radicals, fine. At any time when they start to unjustly limit and the slippery slope falls, then it's no longer a government but a tyranny, and then it's the people's right or their obligation to overthrow that government and state their own. Because if it's not by the people, then it's not a government. On to his contingent two. He says that they have the cause and it's illegal. The credit card and account number. Fine. Anything, he says, bad stuff's out there everywhere. Well, the advertisement of this pornography, it's there. They can access it. They can get it whenever they want it. So obviously they can find it. They don't have to have credit card numbers. They can get a hold of it. Fine. It's there. The hate speech, extending this argument, fine. They can get a hold of that too. That's not a credit card number. That's something that could be harmed or could harm them. Fine. They have the right and have the ability to get to it. My opponent just says there's credit card numbers and age checks and blocks. No, they can still get a hold of it. On to his contention three that he fails to argue. He says that I'm merely cross-applied. If you look to his contention three, that it's merely restating his contention 1, 2, and 3 in his observation. So cross-apply, basically, I've already attacked everything by attacking his entire case. Now on to some key voting issues. The value clash. My opponent is upholding freedom of expression. I'm upholding justice. How am I doing it? By the people, the will of the people. Now, my opponent's saying the right of one person should stand in the way of the rights of the collective of group. No, that's not right. If I want Ross Perot for president, and I say I want him, as opposed to everybody else in the nation saying I want Clinton, who should we have? Should we say, oh, well, this guy wants Perot? No. What we need is we're going to have Clinton because it's democratic. That is how our society runs it. That is the purpose. Not by just one individual's right. As cross-applying the argument of Mill's harm principle against it, fine. If it's going to harm, then we have the right to get rid of it as well. Going on to utilitarianism, fine. He's agreed that that's the best way to go. That's how we run our government, democratically. That's the way to go. That's the only way to go. My opponent says that they're going to be harmed. No, he shows me that they're not going to be harmed, and that we're going to limit it. No, contention. The key voting issue. Okay, the values was the key voting issue number 1. The key voting issue number 2. We're not censoring anybody. They can go to a head shop. They can go anywhere to get it. They don't have to have it on the internet. These places, they're regulated there. These places, they don't let people in under 18. Otherwise, they're going to go to jail. So they're regulated there. So obviously, there's regulation. So we're not censoring anybody because they can get it elsewhere. Key voting issue number 3. Children. He says that autonomy, the parents teach their children, and it's autonomous. Well, my parents teach me not to speed, but I do it anyways. Just because a parent teaches somebody to do something doesn't mean it's going to happen. These children can get a hold of the stuff on the internet at school, so obviously we need to get rid of it or regulate it where the children are protected. Going on to key voting issue number 3, the most important, that the government regulations, if the people find that that's what needs to happen, then that's what's going to happen. It's the government will of the people, will of the individual, so there's no other ballot than the negative. Thank you.
You have a minute and a half. begins. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very serious about your grades this 9 weeks. The requirements are very simple. You've had them for a very long time, and you've had plenty of time to work on them. When it comes to the end of the 9 weeks, many of you, regardless of my personal feelings for you, will fail if you continue at this rate. And I will have no problem failing you in showing your parents or anyone else exactly what you were required to do and the fact that you were not able to complete those requirements. So, if you are hoping that sometime at the end of the 9 weeks, you will somehow pass because I like you, or I want you to debate, or because you're my favorite person in the world, you're sadly mistaken. It is completely subjective. You know what grade you're going to have, because you're going to turn it in. It has nothing to do with my personal feelings. You have 5 class periods to complete those. Okay. Great.
I'm going to bring up the key arguments my opponent made and to show why that's wrong and go on to offer some key voting issues. First, look about what he stated about his case and how he believes his case is true. A couple of the main arguments he brought up was if they deemed, he brought up his value criteria, that that's what capital punishment is. If they feel like you deserve to be killed, then they do that. But that's not what capital punishment is. If you're guilty of a crime in which they stated and put down, like if I murdered someone, then I get capital punishment for my actions. Now, I stated, and this is utilitarianism, if everyone in the room, and I'm sitting here doing nothing, I'm being fine and peachy, if everyone in the room decided to kill me, that's just, if they kill me, that's not capital punishment. I did nothing wrong, I did not infringe on anyone's rights. Maybe they don't like my hair color or the way I dress, but that does not infringe on anyone's rights, and that's how my opponent understood that. It has nothing to do with capital punishment, because as I stated in CX, he did nothing wrong, but we decided to kill him. Another key argument he brought up was if a kid gets hit in the car, he said, this is exactly like what I stated in Mills Harm Principle. If a kid walks in front of my car and I'm speeding and I hit him, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. It's wrong because I was doing something bad to get this. It's not the same thing as me walking. And the internet, as I was using as my example, you have to go there and get to it. You have to make all these advances to get to the internet. He's stating that the kid just walks into it and the car hits him, it's the same thing. No, he's misunderstanding that it's voluntary. I'm not going to voluntarily jump out in front of the car. If I get hit, it's going to be because that person hit me. He said they tried to protect us in the drug campaign. I was just stating that drugs are still accessible. Maybe the country didn't, they say that it was bad. It's still accessible. And that's where my value criteria is completely supporting the value. And that's why we must use my value criteria. It's because the only way to logically get rid of it is not through the government regulating it. As he stated, my opponent, my parents told me to speed, but I'm still going to speed. And that's key. Because if the government says don't speed, he's still doing it. He's going completely against the government. But if he feels and decides for himself that he's not going to speed, that's the only way to logically get rid of it, and that's back to individual autonomy. His key arguments in my case, he completely missed my freedom of expression, saying that they still can express themselves, my individual autonomy. And I've shown just now how that is just and how that's the only way to get rid of something. Because my opponent agrees with me that even though they say it's wrong, he's still going to do it. And that's why it's unjust. And I've shown why his value criteria is wrong. So move on to the key voting issues, the value clash. I've shown that I've won. Just because we killed someone and decide this is a utilitarianism, it's wrong, and that's not just. If you believe that killing someone for no reason, just because they don't like your hair color, is just, and I urge you to affirm or negate to the resolution. But the key voting issues is how he said we should eliminate all potential harms. Knives are potential harms. We can't get rid of it because it's a means, and we have to have it. Now, my contention one talked about the slippery slope, and if we regulate the internet now, it'll go on. Maybe the government doesn't like the people talking about being radicals. We don't eliminate it. We have to allow them to express themselves and have a self-representation form of government. I've shown key voting issue number 2 that utilitarianism is not just. The 3, the slippery slope argument, we can't regulate it, and that's why we should affirm the resolution.
Where's stop?
Round.
Kelly, where's stop?
Red button on the right.
Unplug it, you'll stop. I was going to shake your hand.
Okay, both of y'all.
Uh-oh.
Hi. That's not nice.
Do I have an
Happy-
essay anymore or not?
No.
Miss Fuller, there's so much running around something.
You don't have to do it, but self-government. Stop saying that. That's not fun.
All you know.
Just, you're like,